Alright, today we're going to talk about some of the key differences between Tampa and St. Petersburg, both in the Tampa Bay metro area. Let's get into it. I'm Sam, and welcome to the Living in Tampa channel, where every single week we make videos about what it's like to live, work, play, and move to the Tampa, Florida area. If that's something you want to follow along with, make sure you subscribe and hit that little bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. Today we're talking about St. Pete and Tampa and some of the key differences. Oh, also, I am a licensed realtor in the state of Florida, so if you have any real estate specific questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's my phone number and email right there on the screen. It really is me answering the phone and answering those emails. Also, if you wanted to schedule a 30-minute call and get it right on my calendar, there's a link down in the description below, and that is super easy as well. All right, let's get into it. Tampa and St. Pete, not really versus, but let's just kind of talk about some of the key differences. If you're thinking about moving to the Tampa Bay area, you're probably looking for this kind of information. What's the difference? Are they the same? Are they even in the same area? It's kind of confusing. If you aren't from here, it's actually more confusing than locals give it credit for. I remember moving here and finally understanding the placement of these areas and how they're connected and or not connected, and even how the locals view them is very different than I viewed them. So the area overall is the Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater Metropolitan Statistical Area. That's kind of the whole area, right around 3 million people. You know, that includes those three cities, but then also all the towns in between and some of the suburbs kind of on the outskirts of Tampa to the north and to the east and the southeast. Kind of around the whole bay, around the whole Tampa Bay. Some people really like to hop in the comments and correct me sometimes and say, the area is called the Tampa Bay area. I'm like, Tampa area, Tampa Bay area, these are the kind of details that you don't really care about when you're moving somewhere. You're really just looking for the facts and the general kind of feel, and you're really looking for the general feel of areas and kind of some of the broad strokes. You know, the details and the semantics are not so important when you're thinking about moving to an area. So let's get into some of those broad strokes today. Keep in mind that this is just my perspective. You know, I've been here a little over a year, but have been visiting for the 5 years before that when my wife and I got married. Her family's down here, so we visited a lot, even when we lived in Colorado. And I'm a curious person, so I've always asked a lot of questions about the area, and my in-laws have lived here for a few generations, so they have quite a bit of details that have always been pretty interesting to me. So I'm kind of gleaning from all that when I'm describing this, but I'm also trying to stay in the mind of, I moved here a year ago. What did I notice when I came, and what are kind of the features that stand out to me now after I've been here about a year? Okay, very generalization, broad stroke of Tampa. Tampa is a lot of suburbs. So, you know, kind of over all the way into the Brandon and Riverview area, and then up into Wesley Chapel, and then over into some of the towns in Pinellas County even. And this whole area is really the Tampa area. And most of the population of the Tampa area lives in these suburbs. One of the reasons these suburbs go all the way around, in my opinion, is that the airport is so centrally located. It's right just northeast of the bay, really north of the bay, kind of right in the middle of town, right in between Hillsborough County and Pinellas County. And it's really accessible to the overall population. It's not like you have to live on one side of town to be able to access the airport easily, like some cities I'm sure you've been to. Okay, St. Petersburg. What's kind of the broad stroke of St. Petersburg? I've asked my family this often, and when they were kids, they thought of it so much as it was just retiree central, everyone was using a walker along St. Pete, kind of the downtown St. Pete area. But my perspective is actually really different. It's actually a really trendy, but kind of grungy town. So, you know, you kind of have a mix between really nice stuff, but also a very grungy kind of Portland, Detroit, interesting kind of city feel in a lot of the St. Pete area, where you have, a lot of murals, a lot of local businesses and restaurants and that kind of a feel, and kind of like farmers market every Saturday. And all those things make the St. Petersburg area feel a little bit smaller. And it is smaller, of course, than Tampa, even though it's all kind of part of the same area. Both St. Petersburg and the city of Tampa are kind of inside the bay, and it's kind of known that this bay is kind of a protection from hurricanes. I mean, St. Pete, you're kind of right along the water, so who knows, but it has been so long since a hurricane has actually come all the way around the peninsula of Florida and then up, curving back into the Tampa Bay, the actual bay. It's a lot of work for a hurricane to make that curve, and it just doesn't really happen that often. Usually it continues going north and hits like the Florida Panhandle, hits some of those other Gulf access areas in Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana. When I was a kid growing up in Oklahoma, I grew up like right in Tornado Alley, and so often on the news, they just predict the path of the tornado, and they're not as good at predicting tornadoes as they are at hurricanes. But it would always just be like coming right at us, coming right at Cushing, Oklahoma. And when I was a kid, 18 years there, Cushing never got hit. So in my mind, it's like tornadoes don't hit there. And of course, like your experience kind of shapes the way you view it. But also historically, tornadoes don't really hit there, even though they kind of come right in that direction. And the main reason they don't hit there is actually because it's kind of in a valley and the tornadoes just can't stay on the ground. So all that to say, hurricanes are kind of an equal threat across the area, and some people feel like the bay protects you a little bit, but the area just doesn't get hit that often. And you are protected, by being inland a little bit, even just from rising water, of like the tides being really high. And usually that's kind of how a hurricane affects the area, is that there's just more water, and so when the tide rises, it comes up into some of the streets and into those houses that are really, really close to that. All right, so with these kind of broad strokes, I'm going to hit on a couple broad areas, and let's start with housing. Housing in the Tampa area is a lot more diverse. There's a lot of all kinds of stuff. There's new construction, there's apartments and townhouses and pre-existing houses, there's old houses and new houses, and middle of the line in every kind of way. There's all that spectrum in the Tampa area. But in St. Petersburg has actually been really full for a long time. So even if there is new construction in the area, it's usually a house gets torn down or scraped and then they build a new one. But the problem with that, and I had a client that was interested in some of those are really nice houses. They're pretty reasonably priced for new construction in the middle of a city. But, maybe one house next door has had the same thing done, but then the rest on the entire block are small houses from like the 1930s. And, maybe that's not the kind of neighborhood you want to live in if you want to buy a new construction home or a 5-year-old home. And, maybe the whole block is eventually going to be scraped and rebuilt, but it's kind of hard to sign up for that kind of a block if you want that new construction feel. So in St. Petersburg, you kind of have a lot more of that mixed but mostly older housing. Unless you go kind of toward the coast, whether that's the downtown and pier area or toward the beaches. And in those areas, you get a lot more condos and a lot more even older apartment buildings that have kind of been converted into condos. You get a lot more of housing like that. But you also have some big high-rise, beautiful condo buildings as well in those areas. Okay, next category is shopping. Tampa, there's all kinds of options, in the downtown and in the little pockets like Seminole Heights and Ybor City. There's all kinds of things in little shops and areas with a bunch of outdoor shopping and stores you can access from the street. But also all around Tampa, there's tons of malls. And there's the big International Mall by the airport. And then there's the Citrus Park Mall. There's a big mall over in Brandon. There's a big mall up in Wesley Chapel, Wiregrass Mall. And there's kind of this stuff everywhere. And so that is a lot more accessible in Tampa than in St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, you really just have shops that are accessible from the street. And those are really, sometimes really nice shops and sometimes even better shops that you can access that way in nice areas. But to get to a mall, you're really going to have to go up north from St. Petersburg up into Clearwater. And maybe you don't need a mall. When I was a kid, the mall was an hour away, and it felt awful as a kid, but looking back, it seems like really nice now. Next category, dining. Tampa and St. Petersburg both have a lot of really interesting and fun dining options, and the food scene has been growing here very, very rapidly, and specifically in those two areas. Kind of the broader downtown Tampa area, and then in the St. Petersburg kind of downtown area, and kind of like anchored to like Central Avenue, which kind of divides St. Petersburg into like the north and south numbered streets. And in general, that like Central Avenue area of St. Petersburg is very, very walkable, and there's not a lot of other areas in St. Pete like that. So when you're in that area, you're there with most of the nice restaurants and bars and areas like that. Where in Tampa, you have those kind of areas, but they're more in pockets. So, if you want to go to Seminole Heights, there's all kinds of areas right there. If you want to go downtown, kind of down by Sparkman's Wharf, there's that area, and you're kind of stuck in that area. Or if you want to go up to like Ybor City, you have that area as well. And in Tampa, those are more like little pockets, and they still have, the same walkability as like St. Petersburg does, but in their own little areas. So it's not like in Tampa, you can kind of walk from one to the other. You'd really have to drive. And Tampa is a very kind of car-dependent city. And when it comes to kind of foodie places, St. Petersburg is very popular, Central Avenue, and then kind of down by the pier and down by the downtown area. But then also in Tampa, Seminole Heights is kind of the spot for that, where you have a lot more experimental restaurants. You have places like the Rooster and the Till, and you have these like really, really well-known restaurants. And then Ybor City has a lot of that as well, with a lot more of a Latin and Cuban flair. Okay, real quick, there is an airport in St. Petersburg, but if you want to fly anywhere very far, you're really going to have to fly out of the Tampa airport. The Tampa airport is very nice, and it's not that far from St. Petersburg. Actually, if you look at the map here, St. Petersburg is closer to the airport than Wesley Chapel is to the airport. So you kind of think about that, when you're thinking about these areas. If you do need to travel often to go for work, or if you need to travel often to go visit your grandkids, that should be a factor that you're considering. Okay, beaches. Tampa doesn't really have beaches. Tampa's beaches are over in Pinellas County on the Gulf Coast, and that includes St. Pete Beach, Clearwater, Honeymoon Island, and then all the way up kind of like to Tarpon Springs. And all of these beaches are Tampa's beaches, but actually in Tampa, there's not much beach. I think there is some kind of like little beach you can go to, but it's not the kind of picturesque beach that you want if you're coming to Florida to go to the beach. St. Pete has beaches that are really accessible, just by going right across the peninsula. You have all kinds of beautiful beaches. A couple of them, you need to take a toll road, but it's still really easy. All right, because I get asked about these areas so often, I know some of the key questions that people often have, and one of them is about places like Costco, Trader Joe's, and Whole Foods. So I just did a quick search to kind of see where those are in these areas, and Tampa really wins for those places. St. Petersburg does have a Trader Joe's, but is missing a Costco and a Whole Foods. So if you're living in St. Petersburg and you need those places, you're gonna have to go into Tampa or up to Clearwater, which really isn't that far, but it's not like you can just run and grab something really fast. You do have Trader Joe's down there, and that is actually more of one that is like, I have to have this, kind of Trader Joe's and Costco. Those are the ones I hear the most, where it's like, I gotta have this in any area that I'm in within like 15 minutes. So St. Petersburg, they're still pretty accessible, but in Tampa, especially like kind of the downtown area, they are a lot more accessible. All right, so that is some kind of broad strokes over some of the differences between Tampa and St. Petersburg. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please comment down below. If you have any more questions, comment down below, ask, and locals, please comment back to some of these and help people understand the area, help people find the right spot for them when they're moving here. And if you want to follow along, make sure you subscribe and hit that little bell so you don't miss our new videos every single week. And once again, I am a realtor in the Florida area, so if you have any real estate specific questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Call, text, email is good any time of the day. I am the one to read all of those. I am the one to get back to you, and I'm here for you. See you soon.